Senate will come to order. Those not having privileges of the floor will please vacate the chamber. Those in the gallery and those on the floor will please rise. We're led in prayer by the senior senator from the 8th. Please remain standing as the senator from Tucker leads us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Senator from the 8th.
Let's bow and pray, please. Heavenly Father, we come before you, offering our thanks and praise for bringing us together safely today. As we prepare, we ask that you be in our midst. And Father, may our thoughts be led by you and our conversations be inspired by you. Please grant us wisdom in times of uncertainty, clarity in times of confusion. And Father, may we always remember we are here to seek your will that will bring glory to you. In Jesus' name, and amen.
Amen. Senator from Tucker.
Thank you, Mr. President. If the members and the guests in the gallery would rise as we pledge our allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Reading of the journal.
West Virginia Legislature, Senate Journal, February 2nd, 2023. The Senate met at 11 a.m. Senator Blair.
From Montague, you request unanimous consent to further reading the journal is dispensed with and the journal be approved. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Further reading of the journal is dispensed with and the journal is approved. Introduction of guest. On behalf of the Senate, it is my pleasure to welcome our honorary pages for the day. Please stand to be recognized as your name is called. As guests, the Senator from Jefferson, Teresa Rucker, James Alderton, Amelia Muck. Will the Senate please make them feel welcome? Further introductions. Senator from Tucker.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. In the gallery, the North Gallery, I have a special guest here today. I've known this young lady since she was just small. Her and my granddaughter have been friends forever. If Sydney Davis would stand up and the members make her welcome.
Senator from Jefferson.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I would like to have the Senate please applaud and acknowledge the chaperone for our pages today. Anne Gwen Alderton is in the President's Gallery. Would the Senate please make her feel welcome?
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the Senate, it is your honor and mine to introduce our doc of the day. Today with us in the rear of the chamber, we have Dr. Hannah Laporte from Marshall University. If she wouldn't mind standing, let the Senate give you a warm welcome.
Senator from Mason.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today is homeschool day at the legislature, and we have very many families from around the area that homeschool their children. In the President's Gallery, we do have the Rice family, who, on behalf of the Senior Senator from the 4th and myself, they're from our district. That's Jeremy and Heidi Rice with their daughter Harley and their son Dakota. And if the Senate could please make them feel welcome.
Further introductions. Communications from the House.
There are none.
Communications from the Executive.
There are none.
Reports from standing committees.
Your Committee on Energy, Industry, and Mining has had under consideration Senate Bill 13, establishing annual oversight fee for wells producing more than 10,000 cubic feet of gas per day, and reports the same back with recommendation that it do pass, but under the original double committee reference, first be referred to the Committee on Finance. Respectfully submitted, Randy E. Smith, Chair.
Report will be received under the original double committee reference. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Health and Human Resources has had under consideration Senate Bill 266 relating to tobacco usage restrictions, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass, but under the original double committee reference, first be referred to the Committee on Finance. Respectfully submitted, Michael J. Maroney, Chair.
Report will be received, and under the original double committee reference, the bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Health and Human Resources has had under consideration Senate Bill 267, updating law regarding prior authorizations, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass, but with the further recommendation that it first be referred to the Committee on Finance. Respectfully submitted, Michael J. Maroney, Chair.
Report will be received, Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the bill be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered.
Your Committee on Government Organization has had under consideration Senate Bill 295, extending time that prescription for spectacles or contact lenses remains valid, and reports back committee substitute for same. Senate Bill 300, relating to law enforcement training and certification, and reports back committee substitute for same. And Senate Bill 514, clarifying procedure for administrative dissolution of corporations by Secretary of State, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the three committee substitutes do pass. Respectfully submitted, Jack David Woodrum, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration Senate Bill 299, creating new misdemeanor offense of unlawful entry, occupation, or retention of real property, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass. Respectfully submitted, Charles S. Trump IV, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on Government Organization has had under consideration committee substitute for Senate Bill 419, amending professions and occupations licensure provisions for individuals with military training, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the committee substitute for committee substitute do pass. Respectfully submitted, Jack David Woodrum, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on Government Organization has had under consideration Senate Bill 436, relating to prompt payment of legitimate uncontested invoices by state agencies, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass, but under the original double committee reference, first be referred to the Committee on Finance. Respectfully submitted, Jack David Woodrum, Chair.
Report will be received, and under the original double committee reference, the bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Pensions has had under consideration Senate Bill 450, defining medical examination for disability purposes and retirement plans administered by the Consolidated Public Retirement Board, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass, but under the original double committee reference, first be referred to the Committee on Finance. Respectfully submitted, Eric Nelson, Jr., Chair.
Report will be received, Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the second reference to the Committee on Finance be dispensed with.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered.
Your Committee on Government Organization has had under consideration Senate Bill 465, increasing limit on monies placed in county's rainy day fund, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass. Respectfully submitted, Jack David Woodrum, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on Education has had under consideration Senate Bill 489, requiring Board of Education provide free feminine hygiene products in grades 6 through 12, and has amended same, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass as amended. Respectfully submitted, Amy Ann Grady, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration Senate Bill 498, relating to employee jury service tax credit, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass, but under the original double committee reference, first be referred to the Committee on Finance. Respectfully submitted, Charles S. Trump IV, Chair.
Report will be received, and under the original double committee reference, the bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Education has had under consideration engrossed House Bill 2800, all relating to authorizing legislative rules regarding higher education, and has amended same, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass as amended. Respectfully submitted, Amy Ann Grady, Chair.
Report will be received. Reports from select committees.
There are none.
Introduction of bills, Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that Senate Bill 553 through Senate Bill 562 be considered introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on our chamber automation system.
Senior Senator from the 17th for question unanimous consent that Senate Bills 553 through Senate Bills 562 be considered and introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the chamber automation system. Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Resolutions.
Senate Resolution 24 by Senators Weld and Rucker designating February 6, 2023 as Domestic Violence Awareness Day in West Virginia.
Under the rules of the Senate, the resolution will lie over one day. Motions. Petitions.
There are none.
Unfinished business.
Senate Resolution 23 designating February 3rd, 2023 as West Virginia Homeschool Day at the Legislature.
Senator from Mason.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration, committee reference to be dispensed with, and the resolution be put upon its adoption.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. The clerk will read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 23 designating February 3rd, 2023 as West Virginia Homeschool Day at the Legislature.
Question is on adoption of the resolution. Senator from Mason.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to recognize today, February 3rd, 2023, as West Virginia Homeschool Day at the Capitol. All of you know that I'm a proud teacher in the public schools, and I was honored to be asked to present this resolution by the West Virginia Homeschoolers Association. You want to know why that's significant, Mr. President? It's because a lot of times we hear that public educators and homeschoolers can't be on the same page, or vice versa. You know, that public educators don't like homeschoolers, homeschoolers don't like public educators, and that's entirely not true. We often hear that, but what is true is that we really all just want the same thing, and what we want is what's best for our children. We want what's best for our children and all the children across the state. As parents, we all have an idea of what is the best education that we want our kids to receive. God bless America and God bless our great state for giving these options. I read a quote the other day about homeschooling, and I think we can all relate to it. It said, "Homeschooling allows you the freedom to step off the highway of learning and take a more scenic route along a dirt road." Couldn't we all benefit from a dirt road every once in a while? So we should all commend the parents who take on that challenge and responsibility of teaching their kids at home. And we wish nothing but success for them and all their families. Mr. President, thank you very much. I urge adoption.
Is there further discussion? If not, question for the Senate is adoption of the resolution. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the resolution adopted. Senior Senator from the 17th.
President, our question is consent that the comments regarding Senate Resolution 23 be placed in the appendix of the journal.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Bills on third reading.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 205 relating to registration plates. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Wetzel.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. This is an agency bill from the Department of Motor Vehicles that makes a very long section of code on registration or license plates more readable. The bill creates new sections separating existing license plates by type, such as plates for government officials, military personnel, and organizations. The bill retains existing plates and plate fees. The bill authorizes one new plate, a plate for judges of the Intermediate Court of Appeals. The bill also provides that new plates related to military personnel, organizations, first responders, and special themed registration plates may be authorized by the legislature by a joint resolution. It retains the process by which organizations may request a new plate directly from DMV, provided at least 100 applicants request such a plate and deposit with the DMV the first year's basic registration fee, the initial application fee, and annual fee for the plate. Mr. President, I urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 30 yeas, 0 nays, 4 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed Senate Bill 275, adding state fire marshals to statute included with law enforcement and first responders that receive information on school safety requirements. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Mason.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill adds state fire marshals to be included with law enforcement and first responders to receive information related to school safety requirements. The County Board of Education is already required to implement the school safety program, and that requires room numbers to be placed on exterior walls or windows of school buildings, providing updated floor plans of the school to first responders and law enforcement, first aid training for all school personnel and students for each school year, and active shooter trainings for all school personnel and students at the beginning of each school year. This simply adds in language that allows for state fire marshals to also be included in that. I urge passage, Mr. President.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk should prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine. Ascertain the results on this question. 30 yeas, 0 nays, 4 absent and not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 294, clarifying amount of deputy sheriff annual salary increase. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Summers.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 294 clarifies the amount, calculation, and payment of an annual monetary payment for experience that is made to deputy sheriffs. Deputies receive $5 per month of service, not including their first year of service. A nearly identical bill unanimously passed the Senate in 2022. I'm happy to answer questions and otherwise urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk should prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine. Ascertain the results on this question. 30 yeas, 0 nays, 4 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 345, authorizing Department of Revenue to promulgate legislative rules. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 345 is a rules bundle. As the short title suggests, it comes from the Department of Revenue, and it contains 11 different rules. This bundle is designated as bundle number 7. I'll just briefly highlight what the 11 rules are. The first one is a rule from the Division of Financial Institutions pertaining to money transmission services. It modifies an existing rule at 106 CSR 23. The next one is a rule from the State Insurance Commission, and that relates to bail bondsmen in criminal cases. Modifies a rule that's codified at 114 CSR 103. There's a rule in the bundle from the Insurance Commission relating to suitability in annuity transactions, and that's codified at 114 CSR 11B. The bundle contains a rule from the Insurance Commission relating to pharmacy auditing entities and pharmacy benefit managers, and that modifies an existing rule that's codified at 114 CSR 48. There's a rule in the bundle from the Lottery Commission. It relates to the West Virginia Sports Wagering Act, and that modifies an existing rule. It's codified at 179 CSR 09. There's a rule from the Tax Division, Municipal Sales and Use Tax Administration. It modifies an existing rule that's codified at 110 CSR 28. There's a rule in the bundle from the Tax Division that relates to the valuation of producing reserve oil, natural gas liquids, natural gas for ad valorem property taxation. Members will remember we've had multiple rules on this and multiple bills on it. The bill we passed last year, this is the rule that follows that. It's at 110 CSR 01J. modifies the previous rule. There's a rule from the tax division relating to the Farm to Food Bank tax credit. That's a sunset rule. It amends the sunset date out 5 years to 2028. That's at 110 CSR 13DD. There's a rule from the tax division. This is a West Virginia Film Industry Tax Investment Act modification of a rule at 110 CSR 13X. The bundle contains a rule from the tax division relating to the property transfer tax. Again, this one's just moving the sunset date out 5 years to 2028. Same thing with the next rule is a tax division rule for personnel rule for the tax division, adjusting the sunset date to 2028. Mr. President, that is an overview of what these rules are. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I urge passage of the rules bundle.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate, this shall the bill pass. All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine, ascertain the results on this question. 30 yeas, 0 nays, 4 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective.
Senior Senator from the 17th moves the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on the passage of the bill be used to make it so effective. Is there objection? Chair hears none. On this question, 30 yeas, 0 nays, 4 absent, and not voting. More than 2/3 of those elected to the Senate having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective from passage. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed Senate Bill 457, removing certain activities Alcohol Beverage Control Commission licensee is prohibited to permit on private club premises. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Summers.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 457 amends a single section of code relating to Alcoholic Beverage Control Commission licensure of private clubs. It removes allowing gambling on premises from the list of actions that constitutes a violation of a private club's ABCC license. I'm happy to answer questions and otherwise urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results on this question. 30 yeas, 0 nays, 4 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Request unanimous consent to return to the second order of business.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I noticed we have a guest in our chamber. I'd just like to introduce one of our Chief Justices, Chief Justice Armstead, if the Senate would give you a warm welcome.
Are there further introductions? Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I noticed in the North Gallery we have some physical therapy students here today from and PTA students from West Virginia University, Marshall, Willing, Jesuit, and Pierpont here in the North Gallery. If you guys will all stand. And wow, there's a lot of them. Yeah, so Senate, please make them welcome.
Further introductions. Bills on third reading.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 461 relating to West Virginia Public Employees Grievance Procedure. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Morgan.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. Thank you. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 461 is, as the short title suggests, a public employees grievance bill. It amends 5 sections of our state code. They're all existing sections. They are in Chapter 6C, Article 2, Sections 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6 be amended and reenacted. This is similar legislation that the Senate passed to the House last year, and it didn't make it to the finish line. The bill clarifies that actions taken by an employer related to a declared state of emergency or state of preparedness and matters relating to protected classes under the West Virginia Human Rights Act may not be grieved. It exempts the Division of Personnel as a party to grievances involving the Department of Transportation employees. It requires a grievant to provide a signed and notarized grievance and provides that a grievance failure to sign or have notarized his signature on a grievance will result in a dismissal of the grievance, but a dismissal without prejudice. The bill provides that the time limits can be extended for cause when requested by a party. It requires that a grievant representative to provide the name and work location of each employee being represented under a grievance, and also requires the grievant to identify their representative. The bill provides that the grievant or employer may prevail by default in the absence of a required response, and either party may appeal that decision. Those decisions are appealable. The bill provides that a party may assert a motion to dismiss on certain grounds, including untimeliness or lack of jurisdiction, failure to state a claim upon which relief can be granted, and it requires resolution of the motions to dismiss within 10 days before further proceedings can take place under the grievance. In other words, it requires that to be decided first. It sets forth a process for appeal and potential remand of a level 1 finding of untimeliness of the grievance filing, and requires administrative law judge to decide the timeliness issues within 30 days. The bill prohibits revival of a dismissed grievance that is substantially consolidated. It mandates that grievances are held in abeyance when an employee is on leave. So that's in case you have an employee who's out sick or on workers' comp, his or her grievance is to be held in abeyance. It limits the employee representative to serve in the capacity of representative in no more than 5 grievances per year. So there is a limitation now that's new. Requires employee accounting for grievance time, and further requires the employee representative to request annual leave for any time in excess of 4 hours. The bill requires the administrative law judge to schedule a level 3 hearing within 30 days of receipt of the appeal. The bill permits the chief administrators to resolve scheduling, preparation time disagreements, record the initial conference, and permits them to adopt procedural rules. The bill also updates language to reflect that appeals from level 3 grievances now go directly to the Intermediate Court of Appeals. The statute had previously said the Circuit Court of Kanawha County, which was the place where they went on appeal. We changed that, and this is one of, I'm sure, a number of sections in the code where we didn't make the change. This does that. And the bill provides that attorney's fees and costs may be provided to, may be awarded in court to the prevailing litigant or appellant. Mr. President, I'll be happy to answer questions. I urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate, this shall the bill pass. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk to prepare the machine. Senator from Wyoming. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine. Ascertain the results on this question. 29 yeas, 1 nay, 4 absent not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 472, creating criminal offense of indecent exposure in front of minors.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our question unanimous consent that the bill over one day while retaining its place on the calendar.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered.
Engrossed House Bill 2564, repeal of administrative hearing procedures for DUI offenses. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 2564 repeals two sections of our state code. The two sections repealed are 17C5A2 and 17C5C, sections 1 through 5. So it repeals all the sections in that article, sections 1 through 5. A few years ago, the West Virginia Legislature passed legislation that made driver's license suspensions a criminal penalty, a sanction associated with a criminal conviction for DUI, eliminating the need for the two-tiered process that existed. Before that, they were administrative penalties that could be assessed by the DMV or imposed by the DMV whether or not a person was convicted of driving under the influence. That's no longer the case. This is an agency bill they've brought to us that now that those sanctions are consolidated into the criminal penalty for someone who's convicted, these sections of the code are obsolete and no longer necessary, and that's the reason for the bill and the repealer. Be happy to try to answer questions. I urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk should prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine. Ascertain the results on this question. 30 yeas, 0 nays, 4 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed House Bill 2776, updating meaning of federal adjusted gross income and certain other terms used in the West Virginia Personal Income Tax Act. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the first of two annual tax updates. The bill would amend provisions of the West Virginia Code relating to the West Virginia Personal Income Tax. The bill provides that for tax year 2022, the meaning of terms in West Virginia statutes relating to personal income taxes will have the same meaning as those terms under federal statutes. Mr. President, I urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk should prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine. Ascertain the results on this question. 30 yeas, 0 nays, 4 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective.
Senior Senator from the 17th moves the bill be made effective for passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on the passage of the bill be used to make it so effective. Is there objection? Chair hears none. On this question, 30 yeas, 0 nays, 4 absent, not voting. More than two-thirds of those elected to the Senate having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective from passage. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed House Bill 2777, updating federal taxable income and other terms in the West Virginia Corporation Net Income Tax Act. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a second of the two annual tax updates. This is the annual corporate net income tax update bill that incorporates changes in federal tax law enacted in 2022 into the state corporate net income tax statutes for the purposes of determining tax liability for tax year 2022. Mr. President, I urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk should prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk closed machine ascertain the results on this question. 30 yeas, 0 nays, 4 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective from passage. Request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective.
Senior Senator from the 17th moves the bill be made effective from passage and requests unanimous consent that the roll call used on the passage of the bill be used to make it so effective. Is there objection? Chair hears none. On this question, 30 yeas, 0 nays, 4 absent, not voting. More than two-thirds of those elected to the Senate having voted into the affirmative, I declare the bill effective from passage. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House. Bills on second reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 232, creating study group to make recommendations regarding diversions of persons with disabilities from criminal justice system. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 296, Uniform Public Meetings During Emergencies Act.
Are there amendments to, Senior Senator from the 17th?
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the bill over one day while retaining its place on the calendar.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 463, increasing validity of CDL instruction permits. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Engrossed House Bill 2835, repeal outdated provisions of code relating to West Virginia Graduate College and Marshall University. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be advanced to third reading. Bills on first reading. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that all bills on first reading, with the exception of Senate Bills 449 and 451, be considered read at first time and advanced to second read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered.
Senate Bill 449, updating terms for Natural Resources Police Officers Retirement System and retirement systems for charter schools.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the bill over one day while retaining its place on the calendar.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 451, relating to Teachers Retirement System and Teachers Defined Contribution Retirement System.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the bill over one day while retaining its place on the calendar.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Introduction of guest. Senator from Greenbrier.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, I draw your attention, along with the senior senator from the 10th District, to the South Gallery. We have some homeschoolers from Nicholas County here today, and their chaperone is, and I'll ask that they stand as they're announced. Their chaperone is Jennifer Gray, and she's here with her daughter Ellie, then Riley Holcomb, Jax Holcomb, Kelsey McKinney. And let's all make them welcome as they visit us today. Thank you.
Are there further introductions? Remarks by members? Senator from Jefferson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will be very brief. So just to give a little bit of context to the 3 pages that we have here today, I know many of you recognize my daughter is one of the 3 pages. The 3 pages all come from the Eastern Panhandle Preparatory Academy, which is the brand new charter school that just opened this year in Jefferson County. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity that they have to come here, knowing that they have over a 5-hour long trip. And I'm really grateful for the chaperone, who is also the president of the board for the Eastern Panhandle Preparatory Academy. So just wanted members to know, and there's only 4 members in their 10th grade class, and these are 3 of their 4 10th graders. I'm very grateful that they came here, and thank you all for their support.
Further remarks? Miscellaneous business? Senior Senator from 17.
Thank you, Mr. President. Subject to announcements, I move the Senate stand adjourned until Monday at 11 a.m.
I don't know the survey, but I Googled it to find it this morning, and I just emailed every single one of you a link. It's from a website you might have heard of called foxnews.com. It says West Virginia's already highest per capita trans youth population study may be undercounted. Undercounted. That means we have way more kids than we even know that we have that are trans. Tons of kids are trans, and we should let them live how they live. What the article says from foxnews.com, if you all read it, is that kids that have access to the medication that they need, not the surgery, the medication that they need, thrive. It also says that most of them attempt suicide. And I know that that's something this body has worked hard to prevent everybody from suicide, because mental health problems are huge in this country. They're even higher for trans kids. I can't imagine being a parent and not being able to help my kids with what they need, no matter what that is. If it's $5 for a fundraiser that's driving me insane, if it's bullying that they're dealing with, if it is anything, I can't imagine not being able to help them. And what this bill does is make it so we can't help these thousands of kids in West Virginia that need us, that are at a higher risk for mental health than any other group of kids that we have. And what are we saying? We don't think you're people. We hope you do this. We hope you aren't here. We hope you pick up and leave. I can't imagine supporting a bill like this because it harms children. So I'll be voting no, and I hope you join me in voting no.
The gentleman from 79th, Doug Hanson, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill, as it was originally introduced, was about surgery being performed on minors. But the committee substitute that we're considering today is way broader than that. It's not just surgery. It's about the ability of our doctors, our medical professionals, to provide a wider range of gender-affirming care to our youth. It's about forcing our doctors to withhold health care that's now available to our kids, which will no longer be available if this bill passes. The reason why doctors provide this type of care is because this is evidence-based medical care. This is what we want our doctors to do. We want them to review the data and have up-to-date information about what's working and what's not working. And what we heard when we talked to the doctors that are actually performing this type of care is that there's a mental health emergency, there's a suicide emergency among our trans youth. Suicide rates are up over 40%. Suicide attempts are up over 40%. Luckily, they're not all successful. Our trans youth are attempting suicide more than 10 times as often as other kids. There's a crisis. And evidence-based healthcare is helping address this crisis. It's keeping kids alive so that they can make it to adulthood and be productive members of society. This is impacting every district. As many of you know, I represent a very small district, an urban district in the city of Morgantown, very close to West Virginia University hospitals that provide this type of service to our kids. And I know many of you represent very different districts. I was talking a couple days ago to the gentleman from the 41st about his district that has no urban areas in it. But while our districts might be different in terms of urban and rural, we've all got trans kids in our districts. And even though Morgantown may have a clinic that's specifically designed to provide evidence-based care to trans youth, you've got family docs in your districts and in your counties that are doing the same. They're doing the best that they can to keep our kids alive. When I was first elected to the House, before I came down here to Charleston, I was asking a longtime member for advice on how to make a decision on controversial issues. Sometimes I agree with people in my district, sometimes I disagree. Do I make a decision based on what I think is right or what a majority of people in my district think is right? And his advice, which has stuck to me to this day, is, above all else, don't vote for a piece of legislation that's going to harm people. This piece of legislation is going to harm kids, and I can't support it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 88th, Dr. Hillenbrand is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support this bill, but before somebody who doesn't know me decides to label me as anti-trans or anti-LGBTQIA+, or even homophobic, let me share the following with you. 40 years ago, way back in 1983, a few years before some of the members of this body were even born, my first wife, God rest her soul, and I were married in a Catholic church just outside of Boston. In an era where few even knew what the word transgender meant or what a transgender person was, one of the members of our wedding party and a personal friend of mine was trans 40 years ago. I sat in the hearings yesterday. The hearings were mostly presented a well-organized single perspective. A group not well represented yesterday, for whatever reason, was that group that's often described as detransitioners. Although a minority, it is a minority within a minority, had the detransitioners mobilized to flood yesterday's hearings with their testimony, we would have heard the following, quote, "I was failed by the system. I literally lost organs." From Chloe, who at 15 had a double mastectomy, yet a year later was expressing regrets. From Helena, age 23, quote, "I was going through a period where I was really just isolated at school, so I turned to the internet. My dysphoria was definitely triggered by this online community. I never thought about my gender or had a problem with being a girl before going on Tumblr," unquote. From Grace Ladinsky Smith, a biological female who had a double mastectomy, then within a year had her own regrets and detransitioned. From Dr. Erica Anderson, a clinical psychologist specializing in gender, sexuality, and identity, who is herself trans, who wrote, and I quote, "I'm concerned that the rise of detransitioners is reflective of some young people who have progressed through their gender journey very, very quickly." And then from Garrett, a biological male who taking cross-sex hormones, after taking cross-sex hormones, chose castration, and now, after the fact, expresses profound regrets at both his transition and its rapid speed. Those are just 6 examples. I could go on, but we get the point. According to one source, and if requested, I'll cite reference, up to 20%, and this is a quote, up to 20% have regrets about their sex change, and 10 to 15 years after surgical reassignment, the suicide rate is 20 times that of comparable peers. That's not a made-up number. It's not 97% of all facts are made up on the spot. That's a quote with a reference. Some individuals may argue that a parent of a minor child should be able to make these decisions for a minor. And to that point, I agree. They should be able to make adult decisions for their minor children, but not all can, nor do they. Again, calling on my experience as a scout leader, I can't begin to count how many youth I know personally that because of repeated bad decisions made by their parents are being raised by grandparents and even grandparents. Sadly, not all parents make good decisions 100% of the time. Heck, we even acknowledge that doctors make bad calls occasionally, which is why we encourage people to get a second opinion when they don't feel comfortable with what their doctor has told them. Doctors are not infallible. This bill is not about preventing adults from making these life-altering decisions for themselves as an adult. When you're an adult, if that's what you want to do, I say go for it. Rather, this is a bill about protecting our youth, something that I, as a scout leader, have dedicated over 50 years of my life doing. And when it comes to an issue as important as irreversible sex change surgery, irreversible, I need to stand and protect those who cannot protect themselves. I intend to vote in favor of this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman from the 80th, Dr. Williams, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, when thinking about this issue, the few days preceding this vote, I've thought over and over again about something that I heard recently, and it means a lot to me, and it means a lot to me in this argument, which is thinking about the convenience of opinion versus the inconvenience of thought. Meaning, it's easy to walk around with long-standing opinions that we have, but it's difficult. It's hard to rethink things and go through them. And I know that in our country, there is, in our society, globally, there's the appearance of this newfound way to express oneself that maybe folks hadn't thought of before. But I think the sad reality is that when there was a bit of daylight, a bit of welcoming for trans people, we realized that so many kids that we went to school with, so many people that we know, now feel more comfortable sharing their story. They feel more comfortable talking about who they are. And now we have medical professionals who are able to help them. And I want to make certainly crystal clear on one aspect of this bill that keeps being repeated over and over and over again. There are no surgeries happening in the state of West Virginia. None. None. We had physicians here yesterday talking about this process. They were doing everything short of jumping up and down saying, this isn't good for my patients. They were available to talk to you, to talk about the things that they do. One thing that was told to me was that the most common medically invasive procedure that happens is a haircut. It's a haircut to make a kid feel a little bit more comfortable in their own skin. And I think we can all think back to our time in school. And it's hard to feel comfortable in your own skin from about 12 to 18, isn't it? Can you imagine what it's like if you live with what these kids live with, and we're taking away from them this type of care, which again deserves saying, no surgical procedures are happening in the state of West Virginia. And if we go down this road, the next step is preventing gender-affirming talk therapy. Can't even talk about it. Can't even talk about your feelings with somebody. This isn't the way to go. I know that we celebrated literal Groundhog Day yesterday, but today feels like the movie Groundhog Day, because here I am again on this floor thinking, what message are we putting forward to the rest of the country when we pass bills like this? We're telling people we want to come here. We have this bill, we've got another one further down the agenda that pretty much says, well, if you're different, don't bother. I can't stand for that, and I hope you won't either. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from 76, Garcia, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So we have the Hippocratic Oath in medicine, which says, first, do no harm. I wish we had that type of oath here in the legislature. We do have an oath that we take. It's an oath to the Constitution. As the gentleman from the 5th mentioned, that's something with this bill that we're violating, the Equal Protection Clause. And I listened to the gentleman from the 88th, from his comments about protecting people, and I don't believe that this bill fixes a problem or protects anybody. And again, I don't want to make judgments on what's in anyone's heart, but the bill itself bullies a group of people who are different. It harms a group of people who are different. If you listen, there's no way you can't understand that. We have, and this is what's difficult, it's difficult to do no harm if you don't listen to the medical providers who come to the Capitol, who reach out to us and talk to us about what is really going on. And I've had conversations, as my colleagues have, with the WVU Medicine Adolescent Gender Sexual Development Multidisciplinary Clinic, and what they explained to us was, again, and it deserves being over and over stated, is that these surgeries are not happening for those people under the age of 18. Counseling, psychological services, and hormone therapies that are reversible to try to help with risk aversion, with suicide diversion, And that part was added into the bill, and maybe the most harmful thing about it. It's hard to do no harm if you don't listen to the families and the people, like the people that came out here yesterday pleading for their children, their friends. Isn't that one of the most heartbreaking things? When you have other young people, other teenagers that come down here and say, I don't want my friends to die. One of the things that got me yesterday, maybe more than anything, was a woman who said, I'd rather have a living son than a dead daughter. And that's what it was explained to me by the director of this clinic. That's what they do. They're not pushing people or encouraging people to change everything about their life. They're giving them an avenue to talk about it, and they're accepting the fact, instead of judging them, that may be, that they need to have that conversation. It's hard to do no harm when you just ignore those things. And at the end of the day, we do harm if one person, because of the action that we're taking, dies from suicide. And I heard it described earlier by someone, because when I asked the gentleman from the 20th about, have you spoken to any doctors or medical professionals about what you've put in this bill? He said no. I said, have you talked to any families, any people going through this about what's put in this bill? He said no. So what is this about if you're not actually talking to the people who know what they're talking about and the people that have been through this before? One person's too many to lose in a situation like this. And we can't keep over and over again bringing up bills that are harming other people. I don't know what else to say. I get sad thinking about the fact that we're here talking about these things, because talking about it, the stigma itself is a trigger. I was about to put I'm grabbing here, you see, I do this sometimes, I think, when I'm nervous. My wife deals with trying to help a number of people that have mental behavioral health disabilities. And I don't know that it's always easy to understand for people. You think, oh, wait, is medication? Is that what people take? You take some type of antidepressant? You feel bad? But what she's explained to me a number of times is it's about triggers. It's about dealing with triggers, about trying to think ahead and not letting the difficulty of life consume you. And I think that this is just another trigger that can harm people. For that reason, I can't vote for this bill.
The gentleman from the 78th, Douglas Shirelli, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to express my support for this bill. And it's interesting that a few of my colleagues from across the aisle brought up the WVU Medicine Children's Gender and Sexual Development Clinic. From an archive screenshot of their website from August 15th, 2022, there's a long subsection that they have devoted specifically to the gender clinic. In there, it talks about how patients include gender-expansive or gender-questioning children and adolescents, transgender and non-binary children and adolescents questioning or exploring sexual orientation, and children and adolescents with difference in sexual development. Further down the page, and it's a long one, I encourage you to check the screenshots from the Wayback Machine, it says that our team can provide care, navigation, advocacy, and support, gender-affirming medical consultation, menstrual suppression medication, pubertal blocking medication, and gender-affirming hormones. When you access that website today, what you see, instead of a complete tab that is devoted to the Gender and Sexual Development Clinic, you have a small section underneath Adolescent and Young Adult Medicine with one sentence that talks about what they do. So if the doctors were so wanting to discuss what's actually going on, who made the decision to change this website? At what point was it changed? And I would like to know why. I don't think that there's anything honest about this. I think that they are doing this for profit. I think this is a completely destructive behavior, and even if the surgeries aren't happening now, it doesn't mean they won't be happening next year if we don't do something. We have the rare opportunity to be preemptive. We can be proactive instead of reactive. That's the kind of conservative legislators that our citizens want. This body effectively banned abortion last year, and now there's more of us than there were before. There's a clear appetite for this kind of conservative legislation, and I encourage you all to vote yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 54th, Doug Pushkin's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to respond to something my new friend from Mon County was describing to the body about the website for this branch at WVU Medicine that works with these children. First of all, one thing it didn't say anything about was surgery because it's not happening. But I found out from talking to the professionals at WVU that the reason they changed their website is because they were receiving death threats. That's why they changed their website. I wasn't planning on speaking on this. I would just say that the purpose of legislation like this is more political than it is policy, and it's really disgusting. If you don't believe me, I mean, my evidence would be the last election when many folks in here received, or their constituents received mailers that were incredibly hateful, bigoted, transphobic. If that's the way you want to do things, then that's fine. I understand. I just think it's sickening. And personally, I don't like bullies. I would encourage you to pick on people your own size.
Gentleman from the 18th, Butler's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sitting here listening to both sides of the issue, but one in particular saying that kids are not encouraged or to do these types of treatments. I just can't sit here and go without reading a little bit from a letter from a mom who she and her family actually went through this circumstance, and these are her words she sent to me. She talks about going to the largest healthcare organization in West Virginia. She doesn't name it by name. I think we all know who she's talking about. She says that the largest healthcare organization in West Virginia, which we sought for help for him, would more or less kidnap him and cut us off, meaning cut the family off, from decisions about his well-being. He was encouraged to be transgender and even bully us at home to further his cause. Our family was wrecked. And then different part of the letter, I'm not going to read the whole letter, she goes on to say, and she's done some research on this because this is something she was living. So she was researching what this effect was going to be on her son who was looking at doing this transition. She says, you should know that the average time between transition and detransition attempt is 8 years. Some regret it immediately, some 30 years later when their endocrine system has finally failed. Be mindful that 98+% of transitioners want to change back to the person they were, but to the person they were born as. Suicide attempts are high among the transitioned because they want to be back in their biological body, but they can't. So we hear a lot about if we do this, we're going to cause children to commit suicide, to attempt suicide. But I think the opposite is true, in that children who go through this process of changing, there's no turning back, whether it's through surgery or the hormone therapies. In some cases, there's no turning back at some point. So the suicides also take place by those who wish they hadn't made this decision when they were too young to make it for themselves. That's what this bill is. It's to make sure that children, minors who don't have the ability to make decisions like this, that they have to live with for the rest of their lives, that they don't do it at that point. There's also medical studies that say that a human brain is not developed to make decisions like this until, for males, I think it's 24, 25 years old. That's why we don't have voting below 18 years old. That's why we don't send our children into circumstances where they have to make this type of decision in any other case that I can think of. So this is not about any of us in this room here. This is about the children and the families that this affect, like this mother who reached out to me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes the lady from the 81st, Second Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I see it's a little chilly in here this morning, so I wanted to wrap myself in some one love. The shawl that is draped around my shoulders and close to my heart represents the trans community. I stand before you today, once again, to speak out against a harmful piece of legislation, House Bill 2007, that this body in the majority has made a priority. Some of the people in this room have decided to use our short 60 days together to punch down on an extremely vulnerable population, our youth, rather than seek solutions to help our people thrive. Our, O-U-R, will be the foundation within these remarks. Once again, we have put politics over people. We have put politics over health care. We have put politics over body autonomy. We have put politics over parental consent. We have put politics over the privacy of patients. We have put politics over evidence-based health care. We have put politics over families. We have put politics over our children. We have put politics over the trans community, our trans neighbors. We have put politics over the trans youth in our mountain state. Y'all have decided harming members of the LGBTQ plus community is worth it. So we can score a couple of points for an election that's 2 years away. Y'all have decided that this will be the perfect mailer or billboard with stock photos of actors. Y'all have decided, since we are in and dealing with bad actors, well, let this be the curtain call, because the bad actors supporting this bill and introducing this bill will be the ones creating more suicides for our youth population. The supporters of this bill will cause a mass exodus of families from our mountain state. The supporters of this bill will bring more vacancies and jobs because trans children have parents who support them. It is just some elected officials that want to abolish our children, that is our trans children. I don't want to hear someone say in my friend circle or my family is gay. I don't want to hear I support the gays. I don't want to hear my child is gay. An injustice to one of us is an injustice to all of us. When will you take a stand to protect all? The family member, friend or stranger, you speak, was once a kid. So will you be the change maker or the grim reaper by voting for this bill? Once again, the legislative body has decided to strip away life-saving medical care. Y'all have decided to take away the choice of mountaineers to make medical decisions about their own bodies. My. Do you see the irony? Do you feel the hypocrisy? What about the bigotry? Shucks, where's the equity? In this body, we value health freedom for the chosen, but not all of our children. We value freedom when one is only 12 years young and can be forced into marriage. We value freedom when it's convenient to set an agenda of fear, hate, and discrimination. House Bill 207 is extremely dangerous to the mental and physical health of our transgender youth. Young people who live in a state with the highest rate of trans youth per capita in the entire nation. So why are we not introducing policies to protect our trans youth and every member of the LGBTQ+ community? Why are we not celebrating the physicians and the medical professionals who care for our trans youth? Why are we not listening to the medical professionals who spoke out during the public hearing on yesterday, stating this is a harmful piece of legislation? Why? Gender-affirming care is health care. Gender-affirming care is guided by evidence-based standards of care. It is considered a medical necessity by nearly every major medical association in the United States due to the overwhelming evidence that greatly improves health outcomes for patients who are transgender or non-binary. People of all gender identities have civil and human rights, including the right to high quality and affordable health care and accurate information about their health care options. These rights will exist for everyone except our trans youth. Discrimination, intimidation, abomination are just a few tools in your toolbox to carry this bill to the next building of making West Virginia backwards. When people get the gender-affirming care they need, the high rates of depression, anxiety, suicide attempts that often burden the transgender and the non-binary community decrease substantially. What will we do when those suicide numbers increase in our youth? Suicide impacts each and every one of us in different ways. We took a moment of silence because one of our first responders, one of our law enforcement officers died by suicide. We prayed for the family and the community. So when will you take a moment of silence when our trans youth feel that their lives, existence, and future must come to an end because someone who has never met them feels that they are less, or demonic, or need a baptism? When will you take a moment of silence when you press the green button When will you take a moment of silence when the grieving mother sends you an email and you don't respond back? When? We hear from so many brave individuals, and we heard from them yesterday as they traveled to the People's House to voice their concerns in opposition to this bill. Individuals that put their safety and mental health at risk to speak truth to power and stand up for what's right. But since many of my fellow colleagues couldn't make it to the public hearing because of committee meetings, I wanted to be sure that you hear their stories loud and clear. I will not ask for permission, for every voice should be heard. I pray I will not need a point of order, as the voices may rise as I read every last one of these truths. Give the grace and mercy to our neighbors across this state. Thank you. From a parent of a non-binary teen, I want to thank each of you for your service. As an elected public official myself, I know the challenge that comes with policy making, especially in these hyper-polarized times. I want to start by telling you my best friends and what happened to their daughter. Sammy was just over a year when her mom found a lump at the base of her neck. After a couple of weeks of testing, it was the news every parent fears. Cancer. Staging the worst possible, terrible prognosis, devastating fear, determination, numbness, the doctors gave Sammy multiple rounds of chemo, injecting poison into her tiny body in hopes of killing enough cancer cells without killing too many of the healthy ones. Through multiple rounds of chemo, then stem cell transplant, she slowly went from a vivacious, smiley, bubbly child with sparkling eyes that excluded joy to a ghost-like skeleton whose eyes looked like coal. No luster, no spark. The treatments the doctors did on Sammy nearly killed her and will definitely lead to permanently bodily damage. She will never have biological children. She will have hearing impairment, and she could have heart damage, but she lived. These poisons and damage-inducing treatments saved her life. She is now almost 4 years post-treatment, and we couldn't be more grateful for the availability of these treatments. My child has a different diagnosis. My child has gender dysphoria that started at the age of 13. Everyone in our life would say that joy is the only word to describe my child throughout their early childhood. Goofy, happy, smart, creative, and kind. So remarkably kind. My child did gymnastics and soccer and volleyball and loved to play in the mud, write their own screenplays, and put on shows with the neighborhood kids. But after they turned 13, many things changed rapidly, withdrawing from us, dropping grades, then seeing the joy and the light disappearing from their eyes as they became sad or angry or withdrawn all the time. We couldn't figure out what was causing all of this. One day I couldn't find my child anywhere in the house. I finally found my baby curled up in a fetal position on the floor of their closet, crying, shaking, and looking up at me with the look I don't ever wish on any parent. Fear. shame, defeat, all communicated when our eyes locked. I fell to my knees and said, honey, I love you with my whole being. There is nothing you can tell me that will change how much I love you. You are in pain. I want to help, but I can't if I don't know what's causing it. My child cowered further back into the closet, turned their head down and said, I'm not a girl. When I say this was not on my radar, I mean it. It was not on my radar. I took a breath and asked, are you a boy? My child said, no, I'm neither. I'm just a person. That was the start of my family being able to bring help and relief to the pain that was causing my child to spiral down. While there was an immediate improvement in some of the pain my child was experiencing, because they now weren't hiding from their dad and me. In the months that followed, they had many periods of suicide ideation and actually cut themselves. And I want to be clear when I say suicide ideations. I mean that my child felt so wrong in their body and their life being perceived of as a girl that they wanted to die. Do you know what it's like as a parent to carry on with life when you don't know what you might find when you get home? I left my house one day to go to my own doctor's appointment. And about 5 minutes into the drive away home, with my child home alone, a situation that previously would have given me no concern, I suddenly got a flash that was both image and a whole body vice-like feeling that I would come home and my baby would be hanging from the ceiling. I couldn't breathe. I had to pull over. I sobbed and couldn't drive. All I could do was call my own mother through sobs, tell her where I was so she could come get me. I never left my kid alone again during that time. My child was at risk of dying, and I knew it. I can't put into words what it's like to see your baby, who you know is so full of talent, joy, love, kindness, and creativity, curled up on the bathroom floor, clawing at their body, sobbing, hating themselves. But I assure you, if you haven't experienced it, you don't want to. But then we got connected with the therapists and physicians who, like the pediatric oncologists who specialize in treating Sammy's cancer, are experts in science behind treating gender dysphoria and related diagnoses that can cascade from that. My child received intensive therapy, a social transition, hair, clothes, name, and pronouns, and then hormonal treatment to stop some physical experiences that were bringing tremendous distress. With each of these interventions, we saw our baby become more and more at ease and return to a more stable state. Without these interventions, including hormonal treatments that this bill proposes to outlaw, my child would be dead, or would be a high school dropout because they wouldn't have been able to constantly attend school. Instead, thanks to the availability of gender-affirming care, they are mostly straight A student, taking honors and soon AP courses. My child deserves access to life-saving treatment that others like Sammy receive all the time for their diagnosis. Sammy would not have survived without harsh interventions that put her on her death's doorstep in order to save her. My child and other children like them also will not survive without access to treatments they desperately need. Please trust the doctors who specialize in gender-affirming care the same way you trust pediatric oncologists. There's so many more, y'all. But that's the one that hit me as a parent. There's so many more, y'all. From children who fear, not for themselves, but for their friends. And look like we took a recess. Countless people in our beautiful state begging us to please do no harm to our bodies, anonymously sending in statements to be read on their behalf because they are fearful of the backlash of this legislative body may bring against them for standing up for themselves and their loved ones. Fear of being ostracized in their schools, neighborhoods, communities, grocery stores, parks, jobs, and places of worship. Gender-affirming health care is suicide prevention. And I don't know about y'all, but I want to do everything I can to protect the mental health of our children and teens. I will not take a vote to harm any child. I will not take a vote to put mental health of our youth and teens at risk. I will not take a vote to punch down and harm our state's LGBTQIA+ community. And I will not vote for any legislation that is designed to target and actively harm a specific group of people just for being themselves. As the only queer member of this legislative body, as the only openly queer person in this legislative body, I want you to look at me in the eyes. Some of you can't. As you take this vote to harm my community, your community, our community, I want you to look at me and please vote red to allow parents the right to care and protect their trans children. I want you to look at me. And please vote red because we are one. I want you to look at me. And please vote red because when one of us are oppressed, we know that there will be more to follow. I want you to look at me. And please vote red to keep all mountaineers free. I want you to look at me. And please vote red by doing your job to represent the most vulnerable, the best and the brightest, our children. I want you to look at me. And please vote red if you care about all our youth. I want you to look at me. And please vote red with me. I applaud the two students whose parents fought for them to stay as we debate. And I see we have more. Because this is about our children. I want you to know, like my good friend says from the 13th, we may not agree, but I loved you when I woke up this morning, and I'm going to love you a little bit more after this vote. Mr. Speaker, I will be a loud and proud no vote on House Bill 2007. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 46th, Douglas Honaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me begin by saying that I have a great appreciation and a great respect for my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And if it does seem that I take you to task in just a moment, it is simply because we are all very passionate about this subject, and we have very, very deep convictions. I didn't plan to speak today, as maybe a couple of you just said. And I do always strive to say something with maybe eternal value without taking an eternity to say it. And I don't want to be redundant, but many of you have heard me speak before about children. I've even quoted scripture and implored you to look at children if you want to see what heaven looks like. I've shared with you the scripture when they tried to bring children to Christ and his disciples held the kids back. They thought, there's no way the Savior of the world has time to deal with children. And when Christ saw it, he actually took his own disciples to task and said, whoa, whoa, whoa. Don't forbid those children to come and see me, for such is the kingdom of God. He was saying, if you want to see what heaven looks like, look into the eyes of a child. And my friend Delegate Walker asked me to look her in the eyes just a moment ago, and I did. I stared right at you. So please don't take offense when I ask you in a moment to look into mine. It is hard for me to even sit here today and believe this is a reality, that this discussion is even taking place. It really is. When I came to the House of Delegates, I thought I would be fighting to reduce taxes and to put more police officers on the street, to make sure we were doing our best to bring jobs to West Virginia, raise wages, make our schools better. And from last session to this session, man, it has been an absolute meat grinder being in this place, because we have taken on the issues of the day. We are taking on the issues of the social winds that are blowing across this country. And we're not only trying to react, but we're trying to get a step ahead or preemptively take steps to protect people in advance of the danger that is coming. If you tell me MS-13 is going to be in Charleston tonight, I don't think we should wait until MS-13 gets here tonight and try to start dealing with them. I think we should have plans and strategies and resources in place to protect Charleston from MS-13. It's hard for me to believe this is a reality, because we're talking about the irreversible mutilation of the genitalia of children who are 5 and 6 and 12 years old and even 16 years old. And like some of you who have worked in law enforcement and worked in social services and worked in child protective services, and you've been a foster parent, you, like I, have had a front row seat to the hell in which so many and too many children in this country live in. And when I spoke on this issue in the Judiciary Committee, I told you then, I'm in a room full of attorneys and I'm not an attorney, but as a law enforcement officer, I had to learn some constitutional law. I had to understand the terminology of the law to ever sit in a courtroom or stand before a judge or testify before a jury. And I said, one of the first things I was taught as a young trooper in a academy many, many years ago was when we approach the law, we have to understand there's a difference in the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. The spirit of the law for speeding is not to drive over the speed limit. That's the spirit, is to keep our highways safe and to use good judgment in enforcing speeding laws. But the letter of the law, if we were to follow that, would say, well, if speed limit's 55, I'm going to write you a ticket for going 56, because that's the law. And so my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, when we began to debate this in judiciary, began to talk about nose jobs and pinning ears and corrective surgery of scars, and they tried to take us into the weeds of the letter of the law and make it sound like that we didn't want to address testicular cancer or bodily deformities. And we did our best to bring them back to the spirit of the legislation to protect children from irreversible, irrevocable, unchangeable mutilation of their genitals. We had that discussion, and we talk about parental rights and constitutional rights. And the other day, I spoke on an amendment to give parents the right to decide which school their child attends. And within 4 minutes of speaking on that amendment, I got an email from someone who said, "How dare you passionately and with great conviction stand on the floor of the House of Delegates and talk about parental rights in school choice when you, in judiciary earlier today, stripped parents of their rights to make health decisions and medical decisions about their children." And I thought to myself, how can I possibly have a conversation with a person who would equate us entrusting parents to make decisions about what school their child attends, and that somehow is on the same level as you being able to take a child and permanently mutilate their body and change their genitalia when they're not prepared and not mature enough and not old enough and they've not developed enough and they've not grown enough and they've not learned enough to make that decision. I mean, that's why I think it's such a crazy reality, because if we just give absolute rights to parents without guardrails, we're not stripping them of their constitutional rights. Your child might get up tomorrow and watch SpongeBob and decide they want a SpongeBob tattoo in the center of their forehead. I could easily see a 6 or 7 year old making that decision, but as a parent, you got to look at that child and say, no. You're not going to get a permanent tattoo of SpongeBob SquarePants on your forehead, because as a 6 year old it's cool, but as a 25 year old you're going to wish you hadn't done that. I believe that's true. Children make terrible decisions. I'm a football coach and a wrestling coach. I'm around kids all the time. I do communities in schools, and I'm a father. Children make terrible decisions. The entire front part of their brain is not developed where the decisions are made. When I take football teams and wrestling teams on the road and we stay in hotels, I put them in their rooms at night and I put tape on the door. Because I know as soon as I go to my room, they're going to make bad decisions. America has a long history of parents making bad decisions, and who's to say that a parent would make the decision, well, we had a little boy, but we wanted a little girl, let's just fix that with surgery. Or God gave us a little girl, but we wanted a little boy, so let's just talk to our child and say, we didn't really want a little girl, we want a little boy, but the doctors can fix this. It's insanity. And again, to my colleagues on the other side who I love and respect and appreciate, you keep making the argument, it's not happening now. But I've never heard you make the argument, and it never will, because this is the wind that's blowing across America. And then you quote the creed of the medical profession, do no harm, as if a vote for this legislation is somehow going to do harm, but that certainly was not your mantra. Back during the summer when we were debating the lives of these children you care so much about in the womb, you were ready to do all kinds of harm. You were ready to abort them up to the day that they were going to be born. You were ready to dismember their bodies and use sodium to destroy their little lives in the womb. No one's mantra was do no harm.
Point of order's been raised. The gentleman will state the point.
He's speaking about a bill that was discussed and debated in the summer, and not the one currently in front of us. I think it's rather obvious, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman will sustain that point of order. The chair will ask all members to confine remarks to the bill that's before us. Gentleman does still have the floor. Gentleman from the 46 is recognized to continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will close with this. Let me again say that this is about children. It's about protecting and defending children, and if we don't do this, I will ask you again, as I've asked you before, I have no idea why we're here. If we do not pass this legislation, we will have failed. And I look you in the eye, and I ask you to look me in the eye now. And I say this, if we do not pass this legislation, it will be better that a millstone were hung around our necks and that we were cast into the sea. Mr. Speaker, I thank you, and I urge passage of the legislation.
Gentleman from the 25th, Dr. Hornbuckle is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman from the 46th yield for a question?
Does the gentleman from the 46th yield for a question?
No, sir.
Gentleman does not yield for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman from the 54th yield for a question?
Gentleman does yield for a question.
So you're on the Health Committee as well, correct?
That is correct. I serve on the Health Committee.
Can you give me details of the 5-year-old that the gentleman from the 46 referenced that had this surgery?
Could you repeat the question? I couldn't.
The gentleman from the 46 referenced in our state the 5-year-old that had this surgery.
No, that didn't happen.
That didn't happen? And you're on
I've
the
never heard of that.
You're on the Health Committee?
I'm on the Health Committee.
Thank you, sir.
We didn't take much testimony on the bill.
Thank you,
or
sir.
any.
Would the gentleman from the 5th yield for a question?
Absolutely.
Are you on the Judiciary Committee?
I am.
Did you hear testimony about the 5-year-old that had this surgery?
No, because that's fictional.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Permission to speak to the bill?
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I apologize to the gentleman from the 5th. I wasn't going to speak. But integrity. I got a little riled up because we keep throwing this word around, and we are literally going to tell fables on the House floor. Maybe it's because children are here, that it's story time. That we're just going to make up things for political pandering. Some of us wear the mantra, freedom first. That is the furthest thing from the truth. We had political pandering in a floor speech talking about protecting folks from MS-13. You could probably take a wild guess why that was the gang of choice that was used to put fear into certain folks. I've got a good buddy right here from the 54th who's been attacked for his Jewish faith. So if you're going to be consistent and be genuine about it, we need to be protecting those folks. And I guarantee you it's not an MS-13. I've heard protecting the most vulnerable. Tyree Nichols was the most vulnerable. Let's make sure we're putting safeguards to protect the next Tyree Nichols, if we're truly meaning what we say. Political pandering. I don't want to hear a nan-nutta about another school choice and parents' rights. I don't want to hear it.
Gentleman, state the point.
It appears we have gotten far afield from the bill in front of us. Would ask the gentleman to continue his comments.
Just as the chair sustained the earlier point, chair will sustain this point. Chair will ask all members to address the bill that's before the body. The gentleman from the 25th
Yes,
is
sir, Mr.
recognized to
Speaker. I
continue.
appreciate you allowing me latitude, and I guess I will not speak about parents' rights anymore, which was the amendment proposed by the gentleman from the 5th on this bill, because you want to ignore it because some of us are situationally principled. We want to talk about smaller government. Yeah, I just can't, I can't do it. Both sides of the issue, I will be the conscience of this body. While it is a hard topic, we all have differing opinions and views on this. I understand that. I myself do as well. But you can't in the same breath talk about a parent's right and then strip them of that. We are not their parents. Big government is not these kids' parents. That is a fundamental right. And be consistent on it. I would urge you to vote no, not along your personal feelings on the topic, but about putting that decision back with the parents, and we neglected to do that. And so this bill is flawed on that merit. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 20th, Douglas Foster, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I stand in support of this bill, and for the very reason that many have already mentioned. This is protecting children from these types of surgeries, and it's a prohibitive medical practices. And the reason is because when you look at some of these surgeries, it's irreversible. And when a doctor makes a recommendation, I mean, there's many surgeries that aren't done anymore now, such as lobotomies and those types of things, because the outcome and the benefit was, well, the damages did not outweigh the benefit, or outweighed the benefit, and those were why those procedures aren't done anymore. And this is one of those situations that comes about us now, is these irreversible surgeries and hormone treatments that completely change a child's life, including infertility and not allowing them to experience a normal sexual life. But those types of procedures, and has been previously stated, they don't give any there's no studies that show any marked decrease in suicidality pre and post treatment. And for someone to make those changes in a child's life without a marked improvement in those areas, I don't see how it becomes something that's reasonable. And just to go another front is, just imagine a child that is going through a very difficult time. Adolescence can be a difficult time, suffering with depression, which is something that's many times, or from what I've seen almost all the time, associated directly with gender dysphoria. The doctor, and through, it basically makes a recommendation to the parent and says, well, there's things we can do, and talk about these surgeries and hormone blockers and hormone injections such as testosterone or estrogen. And what many times has been said as well, and what could be said to the parents, is you can either have a trans kid or a dead kid. And that's something that the doctor has many times would be saying to the parents. But that's not even complete and factual, because this isn't giving an increase on the outskirts of this surgery or operation. The child doesn't have an improved psychological or emotional outcome. And in that case, those children are the ones that we're protecting with this bill. And I think it's very prudent to stop some of these irreversible, dangerous procedures when there's not a true market outcome of benefit. So I would definitely support the bill and urge its passage.
For what purpose does the gentleman from 54th seek recognition?
Would the lead sponsor of the bill yield?
The gentleman is recognized for that purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for yielding. So you're the lead sponsor of this legislation, correct?
Yes.
And
Yes,
how
sir.
many doctors did you consult in drafting this?
And that's what the gentleman talked about earlier. I did not do as much when the drafting of it. I talked to a few doctors, but not particularly about the question was in trans doctors or that are performing these surgeries. But since the drafting of the bill, I've had many conversations with nurses and doctors that have talked about these issues with me.
So you talked to a few after you drafted it?
Most of it was after the drafting, yes.
Okay. They told you these surgeries weren't happening, right?
Come again?
Did they tell you these surgeries weren't happening?
Well, that's why the hormone issue was added into it as well, is because those are happening in our state, and the sex hormone injections and those types of things.
They tell you it was reversible?
And that's what I've heard, is they're reversible. The puberty blockers are. And from my understanding, if you go from puberty blockers and block a normal puberty and then switch to the sex hormones, it's almost a 100% chance that infertility will be the outcome of that when you make that switch to the sex hormones from puberty blockers on.
Which doctor told you that?
And that's just from my research and reading about it online. There's been many studies.
You Googled it?
Well, yes, read much online from opinions of doctors.
But that part was, wait, let me get this. Did you actually speak to doctors, or did you get opinions of doctors online?
It was reading it online is what that statement comes from, which I don't know how reading something online that's a statement of a doctor and talking to him directly is different. But
Okay, well, I hope it wasn't Dr. Seuss. Thanks.
Question again before the House: shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, shall we recognize the gentleman from the 55th, Dr. Capito, to close debate on the bill?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's been a long debate, so I will try to be succinct in addressing some of the issues that I've heard excuse me, today. And one of the reoccurring issues that I've heard throughout the debate today is that what is contemplated in the legislation before us is not happening in the state of West Virginia. And I responded to an inquiry that there really was no data, and I suppose the fact that there is no data would support the argument perhaps that it's not happening in the state of West Virginia. But there was also an argument put forward that upon passage of this legislation, we are going to immediately see irreparable injury and harm. So my question back would be, which is it? If it's not happening and there is no injury now, what's the difference if it still doesn't happen? Why all of a sudden will there be injury? That's one. And the lack of data may also suggest, and the lack of these surgeries, if we take that as true, the lack of these surgeries would also suggest that the medical professionals have not recommended them. which would suggest to me also that they're not medically necessary. So the lack of data would show to the necessity issue. Parental consent was brought up in debate today, and I don't want to sort of argue because I see sort of where the argument was coming from, but parental consent generally applies to minors. And what underpins that whole philosophy is that minors lack the capacity to make those decisions on their own. And what is distinguishable with the issue before you from most instances where we discuss parental consent is that this decision almost rests wholly and relies wholly on the capacity of that minor. And finally, I want to address the equal protection issue. I'm not so sure that the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution would apply here. It is questionable to whether it applies, we know that it does not apply the same way to adults and to minors, so it would be questionable whether it would apply in this case. But even if the Equal Protection Clause did apply, the state would have to show an important government interest that substantially, and that the law substantially relates to that government interest. And I think that an argument can be made, a good one, that this legislation relates to the health, safety, and well-being of minors in the state of West Virginia, and what's before you today substantially relates to that interest. And that's why I urge passage.
Question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 84 ayes, 10 nays, 6 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. Chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2007, prohibiting certain medical practices.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2008, requiring local entities to enforce immigration laws.
This bill was advanced to third reading with amendments pending and the right to amend. Let's first have the bill explained, and then we'll deal with amendments. Chair recognizes the gentleman from the 55th Capitol to explain the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The committee substitute for House Bill 2008 requires local entities to enforce certain immigration laws. The purpose of this bill is to clarify federal immigration enforcement in the state of West Virginia. The committee substitute provides definitions relating to federal immigration enforcement. It prohibits the adoption by state and local entities and law enforcement agencies of certain laws, policies, directives, orders, practices, procedures, or customs which prohibit or materially restrict certain cooperation with federal immigration authorities. And it creates mandatory duties for law enforcement agencies. It mandates certain agreements with correctional facilities and federal immigration authorities regarding those detainers. It creates a complaint process to the Attorney General for violations and an enforcement process. Requires that state funds are denied to non-compliant entities under certain conditions, and requires a rule to implement the same. It authorizes the AG to defend local entities and law enforcement agencies in good faith compliance with the law. It also provides whistleblower protections to certain employees, and it requires that the article be enforced in a non-discriminatory manner. It also provides, as I've mentioned before today, in another piece of legislation, a severability clause in the instance that any piece of this legislation is found to be unenforceable. Mr. Speaker, that's a summarization of the bill.
Okay, this bill was advanced to third reading with amendments pending. Let's take the first amendment.
Delegate Mazzocchi moves to amend the bill.
Lady from the 31st, Delegate Mazzocchi.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to withdraw the amendment.
Lady from the 31st, ask unanimous consent that this amendment be withdrawn. Are there objections? There are no objections. That amendment will be withdrawn. Let's take the second amendment now.
Delegate Garcia moves to amend the bill.
Gentleman from the 76th, Delegate Garcia.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to withdraw my amendment.
Gentleman from the 76th, ask unanimous consent to withdraw this amendment. Are there objections? There are no objections. This amendment will be withdrawn. Let's now take the third amendment.
Delegates Capito and Mazzocchi move to amend the bill on page 6, section 7, line 1, by striking the word shall following the words Attorney General and inserting in lieu thereof the word may, and on page 7, section 7, lines 7 through 13, by striking out subsections B and C in their entirety.
Gentleman from the 55th, Delegate Capito, to explain the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In discussions, I do know, I think the lady was a co-sponsor of this amendment, so I thank her for her work on this, and I do thank the gentleman from the 76 for pointing out an important issue in committee that I think that we solve with the amendment. The issue arises here actually, it's more of an insurance issue. So most municipalities, counties across the state of West Virginia obtain insurance, and when those entities are sued, that insurance typically kicks in, and those insurance dollars can be used with certain parameters. So we didn't want to be in a situation where an entity was in compliance with the law but unable to utilize the insurance. So we changed it such that the Attorney General may prosecute these, or excuse me, defend the claims in these cases upon request of the local entity, and if, in the opinion of the Attorney General, they are in good faith compliance. We deleted sections B and C. B, there were some questions as to the legality or constitutionality of whether this legislature can bind the funds of the state to future legislatures, so we pulled that section. Mr. Speaker, that's a summarization of the amendment. I urge its adoption.
The question before the House is, shall the amendment be adopted? Is there debate on the amendment? If not, those in favor of adoption of the amendment will please say aye. As opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill? If not, the clerk will please read the bill a third time as amended.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2008 requiring local entities to enforce immigration laws.
Question now before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Is there debate on the bill? Gentleman from the 5th, Delegate Fluharty, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Gentleman yield.
To the chairman?
Yes.
Gentleman does yield.
It is me, yes.
Thank you. So I had some questions relating to the denial of state funds found in subsection 6 on page 6. So I could guide you there. So first off, I guess for a general inquiry, do we have any current cities or municipalities now that would be in violation of this law?
We did not review every single city and municipality in the state of West Virginia. There was discussions that there may be a handful that exists, but we did not receive confirmation.
We didn't receive any evidence, or nobody came in and said this particular city or entity is not in compliance with current law or this law if it was enacted, right? I was in there. I don't recall seeing or hearing
Every
any of that.
member of the committee has the opportunity to call witnesses, and no member of the committee called a witness to testify to that.
Okay, so we didn't have any testimony to that. So if there was a city or municipality in violation, we have this subsection here which says that money would be denied, state funds would be denied. So how does that operate? State funds for a state entity, local entity, or law enforcement agency shall be denied for the state fiscal year following the year of the violation. So in other words, we're taking away funding, state funding, going to cities, local entities, or law enforcement. So if we're taking away the money, we're defunding the police, aren't we?
If your argument is whether a local law enforcement agency put a policy forward that would suggest that it would not enforce laws, then that would be a case where we would question the funds that was going to a law enforcement agency that had made an affirmative pledge to not enforce the law.
And so we're taking their money.
If a police department chooses and says affirmatively that they're not going to enforce the law, I think an argument could be made that the state of West Virginia should have law enforcement agencies that are committed to enforcing law.
Well, sure. Their law, the city's law, right? The law that was enacted by a city or entity. And it wouldn't just include law enforcement. Wouldn't it include things like fire departments? Because you're taking all...
Can you repeat the question?
It's not limited to just law enforcement, because we're taking the money that's going to the city or municipality. So my question is, or my concern here, is that not only are you defunding the police, you're potentially defunding fire departments and other first responders.
State entities that make an affirmative pledge to not enforce the law could be subject to losing funding if they choose not to enforce the law.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for yielding. Very quickly, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman's recognized.
Yeah, this is what happens when you rush to draft legislation that you think's great for politics and turns out being horrible policy. You're defunding the police. It's foolish. Now, we didn't have any testimony about any cities or entities that are in violation of current law or this law if it's enacted, because it doesn't exist in West Virginia. It's pure fiction. I mean, there's more evidence of Mothman in West Virginia than any city or municipality violating current immigration laws. Yet here we are. We do have a border crisis in West Virginia because everybody's leaving, because we're taking so much time on unnecessary legislation. They're fleeing. So, I mean, if we could pave roads with bills that do nothing like this one, there wouldn't be a pothole left. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 54th, Doug Pushkin's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Chair of Judiciary please yield?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm a bit puzzled by, I think it's Section 5. We're talking about the complaint procedure, specifically subsection C. So, first of all, could you describe what the duties of the Attorney General for West Virginia are, briefly?
Generally or in this bill?
Generally.
Generally, I would say the duty of the Attorney General is to defend the laws and enforce certain laws in the state of West Virginia, very generally speaking.
But also to defend the state, correct? That's
chief
our
legal
attorney.
officer.
What's that?
The chief legal officer of the state?
Yeah, and it would defend the state in court, correct?
In certain instances, yes.
Okay. They have, the Attorney General shall appear as the counsel for the state in all causes pending in the Supreme Court of Appeals. Would you agree with that statement?
Sure.
Okay. Well, okay, when this subsection C of Section 5 of the bill, it says the Attorney General, it kind of flips that role, so the Attorney General would be the enforcement of this. Can you think of any instances, you're an attorney, where you would be been flipping on your client, and a role reversal would, instead of defending the client, being the plaintiff against the client?
Yes, that most commonly occurs with regard to Medicaid fraud.
Okay. Well, that would be against healthcare entities that overbill for Medicaid. I mean, I would think that would be defending the state, but I guess we have a difference of opinion on that. Okay, well, those are all the questions I have about that particular section. In this bill, does it require local law enforcement to enforce federal law? Or does it simply say they can't pass an ordinance or have a rule, written or unwritten, that goes against federal law?
The latter.
The latter. So is that happening? I mean, that's already illegal to have an ordinance or a rule that goes against the law. By nature, that would be illegal, correct? The federal law supersedes it.
If it were,
even state law or municipal law, of course, right?
it's the question whether a policy to not enforce the law is against the law?
No. Is it against the law for them to have a policy that's against the law, basically? If it's federal law, they can't do it now anyway, right?
The bill provides that it's not limited to a written policy. It's not
Okay, so I'm sorry, could a municipality say, we're going to pass an ordinance that say you don't have to pay your federal taxes? Could they do that?
They could.
Would it be legal?
That would be up to the court.
Okay, thank you for yielding. Just briefly, I want to speak to the bill.
Gentleman is recognized.
This is not happening. There are no municipalities in West Virginia that are going against federal immigration laws. It's not going to happen. Well, first of all, people aren't moving here, whether they are residents of the United States, legal immigrants to the United States, or as you would refer to some as illegal. It's not happening. Unfortunately, people are leaving here more so than they are coming here. So I don't think that this bill, I'm looking at it, I don't see where it really changes anything. So I guess the point that I'm trying to make is you can press red or you can press green and the sun's still going to come up tomorrow. It'll be a new day and nothing's going to change. And we're going to waste precious legislative time once again on a bill that doesn't really do anything except help some people in their next election. So as for those here and paying attention at home, there is a second in a series of what I would call postcard bills that are meant for those who would stand on principle and vote against something as silly as this that's against a non-existent threat, when we have plenty of real threats that we could be protecting our citizens from. But for those who stand on principle and vote against it, their constituents will most likely receive nice glossy mailers saying that they support sanctuary cities, even though there aren't any in West Virginia. So when we look at bills and we say, well, who does it help? Who does it hurt? I'm not exactly sure who this hurts because it doesn't really do anything. I'll tell you who it helps. It helps, campaign consultants and possibly the U.S. Postal Service, because it's going to result in campaign mailers, and that's about it. So I guess, long story short, vote however you want. It doesn't make a difference.
Gentleman from the 47th, Douglas Longacre is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, once again, we're hearing the common theme here that our legislation are solutions in search of problems. I think that's the common theme. Is that, would that? I think it's what I'm hearing on almost everything we do. It's not happening. Why are we doing it? Let's talk about leadership for a second. Good leadership is forward-thinking leadership that is able to recognize trends, able to see the winds blowing, able to look at second and third order effects of our actions or our lack thereof. And then you have knee-jerk leadership, which is in reaction mode. I would like to think that this body does not exhibit that we are forward-thinking, that we're looking at second, third order impacts of not having an international border right now. Thank you, Mr. President. I've been waiting a couple of years to say that. Feels good. But we have no border, folks. And if you are those forward-thinking leaders, the adults in the room who actually look at current events and understand what's going on across our nation, with city upon city upon city being inundated with an influx of illegal immigrants, Folks, it's impacting their bottom line every day. I just want to read something to you. There are cities in America who overtly, out in the open, say, come on, we're a sanctuary city. They've been doing it for several years. 5, 6, 8 years back, you can find those cities. Now, as recently as July of this past summer, one such city, New York City, who has declared itself a sanctuary city, to all those folks who decide to thumb their noses at our federal immigration laws. They have come into that city by the thousands. And back in July, this is several months ago, Mayor Eric Adams, the New York City mayor, said that the influx of illegal aliens has proven to be a real burden on New York City's safety net and public services. Their city and county sheltering systems are full and overwhelmed. Their resources are now quickly being drained to pay for hundreds of illegal immigrants to quarter in private hotels around the city. Some are 3- and 4-star hotels. Heck, I'm just an old retired Army officer and a school teacher. I can't afford to stay in those big fancy hotels. I live 15 minutes from one and can't afford to stay there. But you know these illegal immigrants? At taxpayer expense, at citizens' expense, at the expense of legal immigrants who decided to come through the front door overtly and do the paperwork and do the background checks. They can't even afford to stay in some of these places, but my goodness. So, New York City, what else are they suffering? Translation staff are being hired by the dozens at taxpayer expense. And it's not just one language. Over 51 different languages in one bureau alone. They're illegally. All right, and you know, I just heard a comment, nobody's moving here. Well, don't kid yourself, they're being dropped off here. And I would challenge each and every one of you to go back to your county commissioners, if they are willing to be open-minded and honest with you, and show you the books. Show you the books. Where are they spending their money? Public school systems are becoming overwhelmed in New York City. Taxpayers becoming fleeced as city and county resources are used to purchase everything from food, brand name clothing, Air Jordan tennis shoes. Everything are draining the resources of these cities and these counties. New York City expects to spend a total of $1 billion every 2 months. Some of you have been to New York City, you know how much it costs to stay there. It'll cost you a small fortune to find a parking spot, much less a hotel stay. These people are being put up because the shelters are overwhelmed. They're being put up at the expense of the taxpayers in 3- and 4-star hotels. And folks, if you think that this has only happened in New York City, again, you're naive. The mayor of Chicago, another sanctuary city. Okay, I don't know why they do it. Maybe they think they can give these people overlook the fact that they're criminal because they broke a federal law getting here in the first place. Maybe they think they can give them identification cards and grow their voter base. I don't know. That's just speculation. But I will tell you, the mayor of the city of Chicago is having second thoughts. She has asked the federal government for $54 million immediately to help them with this crisis. The consequences of their declaration of a sanctuary city status. And folks, I'm just going to tell you about my home county. Pick a restaurant, go there, look around. I wish I could say they were there to work. They are there because they've been brought there or they moved there. But I will tell you this, they're draining county resources. They're taking up seats in our public school system. They don't know how to say hi yet. And it's not the children's fault. It's not the children's fault. But folks, we better be prepared to receive this influx of people. And that's what this bill strives to do. This is not a mean bill. This is not a bill. I've heard the word bigoted fly out of the mouths of some of my colleagues today. Guess what? This is called prudence. This is called preparation. This is called forward thinking. Because if we do not get a handle on this now, it's going to eat our lunch. You're going to watch that billion-dollar surplus quickly be drained as county upon county reach out to the state and say, help us. We need more lodging. We need more food. We need more resources. This bill seeks to hold municipalities responsible and accountable. When they identify where those people are, they should identify customs and enforcements, the ICE, Immigration and Custom Enforcement Agency, not so we can go and immediately apprehend them and throw them out. It's so we know where they are, we can facilitate their legal assimilation into our culture, or identify if some of them may be bad actors and facilitate their deportation out of our culture. So this is a bill, this is not a rushed bill. I've heard that. We're rushing this legislation. Folks, this bill is 3 years in the making. This bill, we're way behind the power curve on this bill because they're already coming. If you are naive enough to think, because of our no border policy in this nation, that they're staying in Arizona and New Mexico and Texas, again, you're naive. And somebody mentioned SpongeBob earlier, I would challenge you to turn off SpongeBob and turn on your mind to an objective, reasoned thought process to our immigration policy. And folks, this bill will help us prepare ourselves to do the right thing, and the right thing is to enforce our current laws. Our founding fathers want a nation of laws. Right now, the federal government is failing us. We have to take care of our West Virginia citizens first, and that's what this bill strives to do. I support this bill, and I hope that you will take care of your county resources and support this bill too. Thank you.
Lady from the 56, Young is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the chairman of Judiciary yield for some questions?
Yes.
Thank you, my friend. Not my expertise of law. Could you explain to me how an ICE detainer is like a warrant? Is it like a warrant?
It is more similar to a request than a requirement. So it would be a request to detain.
Okay. And do you know who, do they come before a judge, or how does an ICE detainer happen?
It just comes from the department.
Okay, so like the agents can be like, I think this person's illegal. I'm going to have a detainer to check. I'm sure they probably have some background.
I think it goes through a little more of a checklist than that, but whatever protocols that they would have in place.
Okay. Is there a probable cause that you know of? Do they have to have probable cause to issue one? Like a warrant, you got to have probable cause?
It wouldn't be, I'm not 100% sure, but it wouldn't be subject to the same level of scrutiny because, again, it's a request.
Okay. And so, but this bill, it looks like that there would be mandatory duties that if we get one of these requests that our law enforcement has to assist or I mean, I'm sure they'd cooperate, but they would have to assist with the request.
Can you point me to where you're looking at?
Yeah, I'm on page 4, line 21-6. So the section is policies regarding immigration that they shall assist or cooperate with these ICE requests?
I think that speaks to the idea that they can't have a policy that prohibits or materially restricts somebody from assisting or cooperating. It does not compel cooperation. It simply requires that a local entity may not have a policy that prohibits such.
Okay. And then on the jail section, so I'm on page 5 now, line 2, they have to enter an agreement that says that they'll temporarily house people?
Which actually, this currently is occurring.
Okay. And that's not in our law now, though. They just are doing it already?
It's my understanding that this is, yes, this is occurring in corrections currently.
Okay, thank you so much. Can I speak to the bill briefly?
Please, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I must have missed in the news where Lewisburg and Charleston and Berkeley County are inundated with illegal immigrants, like my friend said. I must have missed that part. I don't know. This one's weird to me. When I go into restaurants where there are immigrants working, I know we all do. I've got a lot in my district. I have a really great Asian neighborhood of restaurants in South Charleston. I love it so much. And when I go in, I talk to the people that work there. I don't ask them what their immigration status is because it's none of my business. But I talk to them and I get to know them as people. I don't just say like Coke and queso and sit down and, move on. I like to get to know them and see how they are. Also feels like, I like to be in the state of West Virginia, and we like to do West Virginia things. I didn't know we were bootlicking the federal government by having this bill in place. So I'm going to be a no just because this isn't our job. I'd like to leave it to the people whose job it is and not defund the police. So I'm going to be a no. Thanks.
Gentleman 15th, Keaton's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, colleagues. I'd like to share a quote that might enlighten discussion on the bill a little bit. Quote, "Allowing cities to flaunt the rule of law sets a dangerous precedent. And worse, these policies prevent us from finding and deporting criminals and convicted felons who are re-entering the country illegally. I have repeatedly voted in support of legislation that would hold sanctuary cities accountable, and I am proud to join my colleagues on this amendment to uphold the rule of law." That is our United States Senator Joe Manchin, after signing on to an amendment with Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania to adopt a provision similar to this into federal law. Now, admittedly, that was re-election Joe Manchin from 2018, but he might still agree with it today, and I think that we today should cast a green vote in favor of the bill and reinforce the same statement. So I join my colleague from the 5th in saying, thanks, Joe.
Gentleman 79th, Hanson's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The bill, as it was originally introduced, was about sanctuary cities, but the version we have before us now doesn't even mention sanctuary cities. Those words were taken out of the bill. But what it does, in my reading, is there are certain things that it requires and certain things that it forbids. It forbids a city or county or law enforcement agency from having a policy, written or unwritten, that would make it more difficult or would forbid collaboration with federal officials. It impinges on local control, infringes on local control. We heard no testimony that any such policies are in place in the state of West Virginia. I have yet to hear anybody in this body claim that they are in place. But the other part of the bill has to do with these immigration detainers, and this is not a prohibition in the bill, this is a requirement in the bill that law enforcement they shall do certain things with these immigration detainers. Essentially, they must comply with federal officials when an immigration detainer has been issued. And again, in committee, the question was asked, and we heard nothing in committee then, nor have we heard anything since, that our law enforcement agencies are not complying with immigration detainers. We don't have sanctuary cities. We're complying with federal law. There's no need for this bill. You know, it was stated in this debate that they're already coming. They're already coming. There's a little bit of fear factor there. And examples were given of them coming, overriding the city of New York and the city of Chicago. No examples of issues here in the state of West Virginia. So, you know, let's have a little bit of trust in our law enforcement agencies. Let's have a little bit of trust in our counties and our cities to make decisions on their own behalf. If they make bad decisions, they'll be voted out of office. This is local control. Thank you.
Question is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Does the gentleman wish to close debate on the bill? If not, the question again then is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 87 ayes, 6 nays, and 7 members absent. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares that bill passed. Clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2008, requiring local entities to enforce immigration laws.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2380, relating to school building authority.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, gentleman from the 77th, Delegate Stowler, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, this bill repeals, revises outdated, antiquated, inoperative, surplus or suspended provisions of code related to the School Building Authority, the SBA, and makes non-substantive changes to reflect current bill's drafting standards. All language related to the debt service of this bonds issued prior to January the 1st, 1994 is stricken, along with references to the now closed School Building Capital Improvements Fund, which serviced those bonds. A requirement for the School Building Authority to request the governor to include a $24 million appropriation each budget bill as an appropriations for the SBA is added. The SBA would transfer that to the School Construction Fund. This amount currently goes to the Department of Education for transfer to the SBA. A section that authorizes the SBA to offer individual higher education savings plans is repealed. The definition and the numerous references to the REISs, which were repealed, are stricken. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Speaker, this is the bill, and I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there were 92 ayes, 1 nay, and 7 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2380, relating to school building authority.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2443, relating to service employees with National Association for Pupil Transportation Certification.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, gentleman from the 43rd, Delegate Tony, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill amends current code to expand a Director of Transportation requirements. This would require a Director of Transportation to have 5 years' experience in the County Transportation Department or meet qualifications as a school bus operator within 1 year. The next amendment in the bill would allow for any employee certified as a Director of Supervisor or of pupil transportation by the National Association of Pupil Transportation eligible for any professional employee position involving a supervision of a county board transportation department. Basically what this bill does, it says that if you're going to be a director of transportation within the county school system, that we would like for you to have 5 years experience in that department, or if you don't, they still want to hire the principal, they may do so. After 1 year, once they're hired, they have 1 year to get their certification as a school bus operator. Currently, a school bus operator, when I went through, was 40 hours of in-seat training. You had 12 hours of driving, 2 had to be of nighttime. When the federal regulation went in last year, it required an extra 5 hours of online training. Most of that training, the federal training, went to the individuals that drove out of state. It dealt with the Class A CDLs. Ours is Class B. It did add 5 hours of online training that's currently required. We were already doing 40, so the feds required 45. They added the 5 hours of online training. Each county can do it a little bit differently depending on their classification and how they do it. So like my county did the 5 hours of online training. We already required that. Some actually did in-seat, so they actually had them sit there for the 5 hours. Each county can do that a little bit differently. We still follow the state regulation as a DMV, and then you have to get certified as a school bus operator with the State Department. So you have to have both certifications. We would just then require any individual that's going to be the director of transportation to do that same training that they will be then supervising those individuals. That's the bill, Mr. Speaker, and I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Gentleman from the 98th, Douglas Espinosa, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Vice Chairman yield for a question?
Yes, gentleman does.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. On page 18 of the bill, Section 23A, as I read it, says a service employee who is certified as a director or supervisor of pupil transportation by the National Association for Pupil Transportation is eligible for any professional employee position. It goes on. Is there something in state law that currently prohibits a service employee from applying for such a role?
It depends on how the county posts the position. They can post it as a professional position or service. So if they post it as a professional position, it would go to like you'd be your principals, your individuals. What this actually would do would say if those service individuals have this national certification, that then if it's posted professional, the county can look at that individual. Currently, if they're service and you post professional, the counties do not look at that individual. So this would just say that the counties can look at them. They don't have to give them the job. They just would accept their application as professional.
So I'm a little confused about that provision. So let's say there was an individual that had extensive transit experience, maybe had managed a large transportation operation in the private sector. Would they be eligible for this role? Let's say a job was posted as a professional role. Would they not be eligible?
Under this provision or?
Just under current law.
Under current law, if they posted as service, they could hire them as they could do it either way. So if they post it and they wanted a transit authority, the way they'd qualify now they would then go get they'd have the 1 year to get their certification. But if they're coming from transit authority, they're probably already certified. They may just have to go get their school bus endorsement. Would probably be the only thing that would be lacking. They would already have the passenger endorsement and already have the Class B.
I guess I'm just not understanding why a service person would be prohibited from applying for a professional role. Current law prohibits a service personnel from applying for a professional role?
We can apply for the position, but the employee isn't given an opportunity because the county says, well, you're a service individual, you're not a professional, so they're not given the opportunity. I can apply for it, but they're not looked at because your application says service rather than professional.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 97th, Douglas Hardy, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this piece of legislation. In my county, Berkeley County, our director of transportation was always a service personnel position. So likely that was someone that came from that department, had knowledge of that department, and most importantly was able to drive a school bus. So in Berkeley County, that has changed to a professional position. So now if that position is posted, it's going to be posted as a professional position, and you would have someone maybe come over who is a principal or a vice principal to take that position of more of a administrative type role. So in Berkeley County, we have shortages every day where buses do not run and cannot pick up students. It's posted on Facebook, bus 205 will not run today. Figure out how to get your kids to school. Well, we have administrative assistants at our school bus garage that can drive school buses to go pick up students, but the directors can't because they don't come from a service personnel background. So I rise in support of this bill. It puts the position, I believe, back into the service personnel position where it should be, or at least gives them the opportunity to be able to be looked at for this position. So with that being said, Mr. Speaker, I rise in favor of this piece of legislation and thank my friend, Vice Chair of Education for offering it. Thank you.
Gentleman the 20th, Douglas Foster is recognized.
Thank you. Does the Vice Chair of Education yield? And just on the proviso on page 7, and I agree with the prior speaker, the statement about service positions and that issue, but my concern is on page 7. For example, it has two different, there's an or statement there, so there's basically you don't have to get a CDL and stuff as long as you've been a member of the board for a member of the Transportation Department of a county board for 5 years. Is that correct?
Those individuals would already have the certification.
Well, they don't. The CDL, if they've been a member, even if they weren't driving a vehicle, but they've been a member of the department, the county board, the Board of Transportation County Board, but they did then, and they, let's say they didn't have a CDL, then they would no longer, they wouldn't be required to get one, but then somebody who wasn't a employee of the county board would.
The way it's currently classified, any individual that works with the transportation, so as your bus operator or mechanic, they're already required to have their CDL. So the individuals that would have 5-year experience would already have that.
Okay, and on top of it, let's say it's somebody from the State Transportation Department.
They're
So
certified.
somebody that is working for the Department of Highways, manages a fleet of 100 vehicles. They would have to go, they would not be included in this exception, correct? They would have to go get a CDL license.
If they're already working for like the Department of Transportation, they already have their CDLs. If they didn't, like if they were administrative role, they would then have the 1 year to get their certification. Most individuals, like the delegate to my left, worked for Department of Transportation. He had a CDL license, didn't have the school bus endorsement, so he would then have to go only get the school bus endorsement.
But if they didn't have CDL, which I know many in the Department of Highways do not, they would have to go get that.
They would then get their CDL within 1 year.
Within the year.
Within 1 year.
Okay, all right.
From being hired.
Thank you. And speak to the bill.
Gentleman's recognized.
I think the issue here for me is I think it makes it more difficult to get somebody who is a qualified employee that maybe came from the Department of Highways and did not have a CDL. It makes it more difficult to find employees in this position. Someone who may be completely qualified, but they just happen not to have the CDL. And the federal government has made it more difficult to obtain this license. As somebody who hires CDL licensed drivers all the time, it's becoming more and more difficult to find employees. And this is and this position is more of a administrative role, operating, handling, evaluating the employees that's driving the bus and also scheduling where they're going. But the issue here is they would also be required now to get a CDL within that first year. And in many cases, that's going to be difficult to do. It's just become more difficult as the federal government's changed their rules. So I agree with the last portion of the bill, but I do not agree with this adding this 1 year requirement to get the CDL qualification. So I would oppose the bill.
Gentleman the 18th, Butler's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would the sponsor yield for another question, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Don't mean to beat you up here, and I think I'm with you on this bill, but I just want to try to clarify some things for me and maybe for some others. So, as a CDL driver myself, I know what I had to go through to get my license, and it has changed, but the the school bus garages, the transportation departments in each county, they train bus drivers, correct?
They do. They can have their own trainer, or they can go through the co-ops or the old RESAs.
Okay, so that training that they offer does provide the CDL license that's required for a Class B license, as you had explained to me before, correct?
It does.
Okay, and the average, the time that it should take for that is 2 months, correct?
It's approximately, when I did mine, was 2 months. It depends on your instructor and how many hours. If your instructor is currently a bus operator, he's not instructing you during school hours, so it may take a little longer, but the majority, they get it done in the summer months, 2 months.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, going back to page 18 of the bill, where it's giving the service employees the availability to request this job, it's citing this specific certification, Director of Supervisor of Pupil Transportation. So that section is allowing these people to apply as well as the others who are already able to apply. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So you're not excluding anyone by this. You're actually allowing additional people to apply.
Yes, those individuals that would have the NAPT certification would then be eligible to be looked at. They don't have to get the position, but they are then put into that pool if they apply.
Okay, again, I want to make sure we're not excluding anybody that does not have that particular
No, we're
certification.
including these individuals.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Haven't gotten the answers here. What I'm concerned about is that we don't end up making it more difficult for our county boards to hire people to fill these positions. And from what I hear here, I don't think it makes it any more difficult. And in fact, it looks like it adds the availability of people. So for that reason, I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Lady from 73rd, Dr. Summers is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to this bill. I think a lot of issues we've been talking about across the state really are setting forth the troubles that rural areas have versus urban areas. In rural areas of West Virginia, we don't always have all of the potential applicants that you do in bigger areas. I think that this bill narrows the pool of applicants that you're going to have to fulfill this job, and in some counties, the Director of Transportation is also the Director of other type services. So for that reason, I will oppose the bill.
The question again is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Gentleman 84th, Dr. Jennings is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the delegate from 43rd yield? Wasn't the reason for this bill that we wanted a director that knew what it was like to go up a dirt road and try to turn a bus around? Wasn't that what the purpose was? Because they would be sent places and the drivers would have to say, try it. It doesn't work, or the timing. Wasn't that part of the reason for this?
That can be the effect of the bill, yes.
That's the reason why I'm for this. That we want some knowledge. If someone's going to be overseeing the bus drivers, we want some knowledge in there as the director as to what these buses can and cannot do. If you would see some of the places that they take these buses, you would absolutely understand. And you would want someone that's telling them, because the parents will come in and say, can you come up and get my kids up here? And if the director is not accustomed to how these buses get there, he said, oh, sure, you can take that 70-person bus up there. It's a narrow road that's 3 miles long. If anybody meets you, somebody's got to back up. And those are the things you run into. So I can see where you want the 5 years of experience as the director, and I'll be for the bill. Thank you.
Again, the question is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Does the gentleman in 43rd wish to close debate on the bill?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman is recognized.
What this bill does is gives options to counties. Right now, you can hire a principal to be the director that come from a high school that knows nothing about transportation. Only thing this does, I'd like for you to have 5 years saying prior to getting it. Now what we put in there says once you get there, get your certification within 1 year. I don't think it's too much to ask to be the director of transportation, that you know what the individuals are going through. You can hire somebody from Transit Authority if they come in. They have 1 year to get their certification to be able to do it. so that they know what the individuals are going through. This is opportunity for counties when they hire their individual that they can say, now you got 1 year to go do the position. Make sure you know what your individuals are going through. That's all it does, and I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 79 ayes, 14 nays, and 7 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2443 relating to service employees with National Association for Pupil Transportation Certification.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House and the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2768 to require all state entities and Chapter 30 boards to use .gov domains and email addresses.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, Gentleman 68th, Douglas Phillips, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of House Bill 2768 is to require state entities and Chapter 30 boards to utilize a .gov website domain and email address in order to identify them as an official government entity. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Gentleman with the 80th, Douglas Williams, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Quick question for my friend, the chair. So does all state entities include our institutions of higher education that use EDU emails?
No, they would still be able to utilize
They could still use those. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Gentleman 87, Douglas Howell, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Gentleman yield.
Yes, sir.
Does the bill allow for the agency to maintain it if it had a .com to refer people to that for a period of time so that people can find that agency?
Yes, certainly they could redirect.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the bill? If not, the question is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 93 ayes, 0 nays, and 7 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2768 to require all state entities and Chapter 30 boards to use .gov domains and email addresses.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House and the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2941 to extend the end date of the State Advisory Council on Post-Secondary Attainment Goals.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, Gentleman 77, Douglas Statler, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill simply extends the sunset date of the Post-Secondary Council originally formed through the legislation passed in the 2020 season. That's a bill, Mr. Speaker. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There were 92 ayes, 1 nay, and 7 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2941 to extend the end date of the State Advisory Council on Post-Secondary Attainment Goals.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3091 requiring counties provide fiscal information for State Auditor's West Virginia checkbook website.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, Gentleman 68 to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of the committee substitute for House Bill 3091 is to require counties to provide information to the state auditor for inclusion on the financial transparency website. I urge its passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 93 ayes, 0 nays, and 7 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3091, requiring counties provide fiscal information for state auditors, West Virginia checkbook website.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Are there further bills on third reading? If not, bills on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2538, requiring usage of child welfare information technology systems.
Gentleman 96th.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent pursuant to House Rule 100 that the bill be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Are there objections to the bill being referred to the Committee on Finance? No objections are heard. Committee substitute for House Bill 2538 will be referred to the Committee on Finance. Next bill on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2789, removing birthing centers from Certificate of Need.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2832, clarifying appropriate and inappropriate duties of for school counselors while also providing the definition of a school counselor.
From the 96th.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that we postpone action one day.
Are there objections? No objections are heard. Action will be postponed one day. Next bill on second reading.
House Bill 3141, relating to the practice of dentistry.
Are there amendments?
Delegate Summers moves to amend the bill on page 4, line 84, after the word treatment by striking the comma and the following: through surgical, non-surgical, or related procedures.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment just read by the clerk. Chair recognizes Lady with 73rd Delegate Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The removal of those 3 words, they were just 3 words that were further clarifying how they treat for diseases, and so we just reverted back to the original way they had stated the definition of dentistry. There were some concerns that was opening up the scope of practice.
Are there other members who wish to speak to passage of or adoption of the amendment? If not, the question is, shall the amendment be adopted? Those in favor of adoption of the amendment will please say aye. As opposed to, please say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares that amendment adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading. Are there other bills on second reading? If not, bills on first reading.
Senate Bill 4, creating Adopt-A-Trail volunteer programs for public land under DNR jurisdiction.
The bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2196 to remove opioid treatment programs from requiring a certificate of need.
The bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2611 to remove certain territorial limitations on a banking institution's ability to offer messenger services or mobile banking facilities.
The bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3055 to create a vocational math class for students interested in careers in the trades.
The bill will be advanced. Are there further bills on first reading? If not, leaves of absence. Gentleman 96th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For our colleagues, Bridges, Ellington, Griffith, Horst, and McGeehan.
Are there objections to leaves of absence being granted? There are no objections. Leaves of absence will be granted. Introductions. Gentleman 99th, Third Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Up in our South Gallery here, we have some folks from the Eastern Panhandle Preparatory Academy that came down today. Had an opportunity to page over at the Senate and have been sitting here patiently watching us debate all these bills. So please stand when I call your name: Teresa Rucker, Malia Mock, and James Addington. Thank you guys for coming down the whole trip.
Other introductions? Miscellaneous business. Gentleman from the 96th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, subject to announcement, that the House adjourn until 11 a.m. Monday morning.
Are there announcements? Gentleman 96th.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Rules will meet Monday morning, 10:45 a.m. at the back of the chamber.
Gentleman 97, Doug Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Finance will meet today, February 3rd at 12:30 p.m. in the Finance Committee room. There will be 2 agencies presenting their budgets, Agriculture and Conservation. And also, Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Finance will have a meeting Monday, February the 6th at 1 p.m. in the Finance Committee room. The agenda will be posted.
Gentleman from 51st, Doug Fast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Judiciary will meet Monday at 3 p.m. in the committee meeting room. The agenda will be posted.
Gentleman 68. Go ahead, Gentleman first.
We are not meeting today.
Gentleman 68, Dr. Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Government Organization will meet Monday, February 6th at 1 p.m. in the Government Organization Committee Room. Republicans will caucus in the Chair's office at 12:45. The agenda will be posted.
Gentleman 43rd, Dr. Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Education will meet Monday, February the 6th at 2 p.m. in the House Education Committee Room. The agenda is posted.
Are there other announcements? If not, the question is on the motion that the House stand adjourned until 11 a.m. Monday. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. The House is adjourned until 11 a.m. Monday.